Hi, I'm Jenny Miller of Let's Get Sewing. Are you ready to take the fear and frustration out of your sewing experience and finally get sewing? Then you're in the right place. Be sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any of my tips and tutorials. And check out the caption too. There's a link to my website where you can find out more about my course, Conquer Your Sewing Machine, and future courses that I have coming. And now, let's get sewing. Today, we are talking about a tool that you may or may not have heard of before or seen before. You may have seen it and wondered what it is, or maybe it's something that you've used before. It is a tool that looks, well, there's several different forms of it. One of them looks like this. This kind may have come with your sewing machine. Not every sewing machine comes with one, but when a sewing machine comes with one, it looks like this. It may look something like this, which is a multi-use tool. This is also used to turn points, but you'll see these little keyhole slots in it, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. This next one might give away what it is that we're talking about. These are a brand called Big Jig. I don't know if you can see that on there, and you can see that this looks like a pair of jeans. These are pink. Maybe you can see it better on here, a little pair of jeans. They are specifically designed for sewing over big, thick seams, especially in jeans hems. When you have the flat-felled seam on the outside or inside inseam of your jeans, and you roll that up to hem it, you have, I believe it is 6 or 8 layers of denim that you're trying to go through, and it is extremely difficult. Some machines can't handle it at all, and so we have this tool to help us do it. So let's move over to the sewing machine and see how it works. So it turns out I was off by a little bit. This is a flat-felled seam that is usually the inseam of a pair of jeans, especially a good sturdy pair of jeans. And it is rolled so that it is 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of fabric right there. But now we need to roll this twice, once, which is 8 layers, twice, which is 12 layers of fabric. Now, some people will cut out some of the seam allowance so that it's not quite so bulky there, but that can actually weaken the seam. And up here where we're going to be sewing, we need it to be all of the layers anyway, because if we cut it shorter than that, it's just going to stick up in the hem. So let me show you how we're going to handle this really thick spot. So we have all of our different tools here, and you'll see here, this is a little bit thinner here, this is a little bit thicker here. If we look at this particular tool, this side is thinner, this side is thicker. So it depends on the thickness of the seam that we are working with. I am going to demo using this Big Jig tool. These are also 2 different thicknesses. I want the maximum thickness here because I have such a thick seam that I need to go over. So like I showed you, I'm going to roll my seam into place. So I am going to place my pants underneath the presser foot and start before I get to my big bulky seam. So I can lower the presser foot and start stitching 1 or 2 stitches. You'll see that when this presser foot started to lift up over the seam, the needle jammed. It doesn't want to go down through the fabric because the presser foot is pushing the fabric back towards me. That's where this tool comes into place. So I am going to lift my presser foot, take my this one is the big jig tool, and I'm going to slide it underneath the presser foot and straddle it on either side of the needle. And then I've lowered my presser foot back down again. I'm getting everything into place. Might have to adjust that needle a little bit, but now I am just going to continue to sew across this thick hem. And there is so much fabric in there. I probably could cut some out, but I want you to see how this is going to help me get up and over this big mess. Now, when I get to the other side, I'm going to pull this around and put it in front of the needle. I need to get this adjusted where I need it. Put it back in front of the needle so that it will straddle on either side, and continue to sew off the front side of the bulky seam. Once I've cleared that, I can pull the tool out, and then I would just continue to sew the hem of the jeans. So you can see, once I take this out of the machine, that it has sewn right over the top of that bulky seam without any skip stitches or big loops. You can also see on this side, which would be the outside of the pants, that I didn't get any skip stitches or loops. I have a nice hem seam right across the big thick bulk. So that is what these funny looking tools are for. And I hope that that helps you understand it a little bit better. You'll see that my machine still had some trouble with the bulk, but without this, it would not have gone over that seam at all. I would have been stuck, and it would have skipped and made these big awkward stitches when the needle couldn't go all the way through because the presser foot was at such an angle. I neglected to tell you previously, there are several different names that these go by. Each manufacturer kind of has their own name for it. This is just a multi-use tool. It's made by Oxmoor House was the company. I have had it for ages. I use it more for point turning than I do for jeans seams. It just happens to have those in it. The one that comes with your sewing machine is usually referred to as a hump jumper because it goes over the big hump or the big seam. The ones that I like the best, these big jigs, that's the name of it, big jig. I think they got that name from another brand. I believe it is Dritz. Somebody makes one that is called Jenni, and it's just a jig that puts it up and over the seam. I actually called it Jenni for many years, all of these different ones, because that's the only name I had heard. But since then, I've heard them called by other names. And of course, this one specifically says big jig on it. So any of those names, if you look online, you can find them online. You can find them on Amazon. You can find them at a lot of fabric stores, especially the Jenni jig. It's probably the most common one that you're going to find in a store. But I think that when you are sewing the hems of jeans, you will find these extremely helpful. I can't live without them. I know that some people have other hacks that they like to use, but I love to have this tool because it works so well every time. I have it handy by my machine, so I would encourage you to try it out, especially if you're hemming a lot of jeans, but anytime you need to go over a bulky section, you will find you love your jean jig, whatever it's called. So thank you for joining me today. I hope that you found it helpful. And now let's get sewing. Thank you for joining me today. My goal is to take the frustration out of your sewing experience, and so I hope my tips are helpful. Feel free to comment with any questions or ideas you may have. I will try to get back to you as soon as I can. Now, Let's get sewing.